Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Welcome to another LFG Live. Today we are continuing on with our March hiring and team structure. So far this month, we've had when is the right time to hire, the true cost of a bad hire. If you didn't get to catch those live, they are all on the LFG, the May Fusion Group YouTube channel for you to take a peek. This week, of course, is hiring for skills versus values. Last week, I did talk about this a little bit. But today we're going to get a little more in depth. So a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about the right team is, of course, finding the right person to start, right? You want somebody who is going to be a great fit for your organization, better than your best people, not just filling a seat or putting a body in that seat, all things that you guys know I hate, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But first, as usual, what are we drinking today? Today I have, actually, no, I think I've had this one before, but that's okay because it's actually really good. Magic Hour tea, the Aquarius Magic Hour. I did make my tea a little bit ago, so it's a little cold by now, but I do make sure that I bring some hot water down in this. Keeps it warm for me. Oh, yeah, that is steaming even though I made it over an hour ago. So cheers. Enjoy your tea, your coffee, your water, your seltzer, whatever you were drinking during this day. And let's jump right into hiring for skill versus values. So when I first say that, I'm sure there's some people going, well, of course we hire for skill. And as we should. We need people to be able to do the job that's in front of them, right? But if we have somebody, and think of this like a seesaw now, if we have somebody who's high skill and low values, what happens there? They're going to produce results. They're going to get shit done, right? Because they have those skills, but they're going to create drama when they do it. They're fast. They get stuff done really quick because they have those skills. Maybe they cut corners. Maybe the product or the output isn't going to be to the same criteria that you have as an organization. They're confident. They know what they're doing. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm very confident, but they're not coachable. And I'll tell you that last one is probably one of the biggest no-nos for me is having somebody who's not coachable. I've been doing this for over 20 years in HR and business and leadership. And I learn constantly, whether it's from a new hire, somebody in the business forever, or just one of the courses that I'm taking or something interesting I read online. I'm constantly learning, and that's why I'm still good at what I do. Anybody who is not coachable and won't continue to learn, they're going to get phased out. The businesses are going to outgrow them. Things are going to change past them, and they're still going to have that confidence, but that confidence is going to be at a skill set that was probably 10 years antiquated. So again, high skill, they're going to produce the results, but cause drama, not be coachable. And then their teams are going to go to you as either the owner, CEO, founder, whatever you may be, and say, and complain about these things. And they're going to go, but they're so good at this job. They're so good at what they do. They have that skill. They have the skill. But here's going to be the big question to ask. That's cool. But are they good for the business? Not just do they have that skill, but are they good at that business? So today we're going to break down a little bit of skill versus values, how to prioritize them, because there's going to be a little bit of a seesaw, right? How to screen for them and how to stop problems or stop hiring people that are going to be problematic, that are just going to drain you and drain your resources and drain your leadership, and are going to take up more of your time than you really want to invest in them. And I've had those employees in the past where I felt like 75-80% of my week was talking about this one employer, these two employees, when really it shouldn't be that. We shouldn't be giving these negative employees that much attention. So let's talk first about how we're defining the skill versus values, right? First is a skill should be obvious. What can that person do? Their technical ability, their experience, their speed, their accuracy, their knowledge, maybe even some certifications that they may need to be able to do that job. For example, as an HR professional, I have my SHRM CPP HR and a degree in human resources and organizational leadership. Those give me a skill to do, not just my degrees and titles, but also my experience over the years gives me the skill. The values, though, are how somebody actually shows up in that business. It's the integrity they have. It's the accountability they have. It's the respect that they have, not just for the business, not just for the clients, but for the teams that they serve. Their coachability, again, I've already said that's a huge one for me. Teamwork, ownership of the processes, not just ownership of the processes, but ownership of failures. That's a huge one for me. And I tell my kids this as well. We're all going to make mistakes. What's important when that mistake is made is that we own it and we fix it. We don't try to hide it. We don't tuck it behind us. So when we look at skills, it's what you can do. And when we look at values, it's really how you can do it, right? For most things, I'm going to put the asterisks there because I know there's people in many different industries here, but for the most part, in a lot of parts, you can train skill faster than you can fix values. The core of who that person is and the values that they hold can be changed. They can be edited over time. I know I've changed over time through some of the amazing people that I've met over the years who have made me an even better person as I grew. But it's harder to fix values than it is skills. I can teach somebody how to do certain things before I can teach them how to change their values. And if you hire somebody who does not share your values, does not share how you like to treat people, how you like to show up, your culture and your business will pay the price. And we did talk about culture not that long ago in one of our sessions and how important culture is to your business. So how do you hire knowing this now, right? Now, I'm going to be very clear and say that sometimes, just sometimes, that skill is going to have to outmaster the values, right? Doesn't mean values is going to completely disappear, but it's again going to be that little bit of a seesaw, right? So when we're going to prioritize values is when that person is going to be working with your clients, your customers. If that role impacts team morale. So again, I know I mentioned just a couple times today that I'm in HR. It was one of the fields I'm in is HR. If I'm going to be your human resources person who impacts 100% of your workforce, including new hires and people who have been here for however long they've been here, and I don't share your company values, I'm going to destroy your culture. I'm going to destroy what you've already built. Now, if your culture is already struggling and you're bringing me in to help fix that, that's a different story. But what I'm saying is, generally speaking, we need to be aligned in how we do things to be able to do that. We're going to prioritize values when we need somebody to truly be reliable. We need somebody who's going to be there for the teams. And if you have a strong training process, if you can bring somebody in because you have a really great onboarding process, which we're going to talk about a little bit, actually March 27th next week. If you have a really great training process, you can bring somebody on who maybe is missing a little bit of the skills, but really has those amazing values that you're looking for and that real cultural fit. You can train them. You can help move those skills up. And when I talk about that, I think about years and years ago, I had somebody, they were a sales rep in one of my, it was actually when we had our singular AT&T stores at Express stores. And this person did not know a ton about cell phones. They just didn't. They came on board. It was back in, probably 2003, 2004. Cell phones weren't as prevalent as they are today. So it was a little bit different. They didn't know a ton, but you know what they had was personality. They showed up to work early all the time. They helped out around the store. They did everything they were supposed to do. They were great to their coworkers. They were great to their community. And when I knew that is every Christmas I would walk in and this particular sales rep would have a box of gifts that local customers got, or, customers would come in bringing coffees from the Dunkin' Donuts a few doors down all the time. And when I compared to this person to some of the other more technically savvy people I had, this person was better at their job because of the values that they held, not because of their technical expertise in cell phones. It was because of who they were, how they impacted the team within that location, and how they impacted the community. They were even better. So that's what we're talking about, prioritizing the values in those situations. The values fit person will follow your processes. They're going to ask questions of how to do things right. They're going to take feedback when it's available, and they are going to get better fast because they are invested in doing the right thing. So if there's things that they don't know, they're going to work to the best of their ability to be able to get to that point of skills, right? And they still may never be as great as your top skilled person, but what they will have is the values, the want to learn, the drive to learn, the drive to be a great coworker, a great employee, and a great person to your clients and customers. And that's going to go even further than the top skilled person with absolutely no value share. Now, we're going to flip this around a little bit, and we're going to say, realistically, sometimes skill is going to have to outweigh value, but it's never going to negate values. So think about a truly, truly higher technical skill. So if the role is truly, truly specialized, then you might need to look at skill a little bit more highly than value. Value is still there, but think of technical, compliance heavy. I think about, people who can work on one particular machine that a lot of people can't look at. Now, I don't look at things like accounting. I don't look at, honestly, things like HR, because there's so many of us out there that if you find somebody who has that skill set or those degrees, but they don't have the values, you could probably look for somebody else. But I'm thinking of something that's truly, truly, the first thing that pops in my head. Did you ever see those trucks that the tires themselves are the size of school buses, right? I'm sure there's not a lot of people who can drive those. But so you might have to take somebody who has that skill, even if their values aren't perfect, because there's probably not a lot of people to choose from to do that. So the role is highly specialized. When the cost of mistakes are high, building a rocket ship, building a space shuttle, certain components of that, not only is it important from a skill perspective, but the risk is high, right? It's human lives plus all the money that they're spending on that. And if you don't have the training capacity, if you're looking at your organization and we're in a part of growth where we really don't have people that can teach this person the skill that they need, we have to bring people on with skill. I had talked about in the past with when I was hiring in certain roles, I had said that I interviewed great folks and said they would be a great employee number 3 for my department, but they can't be employee number 1. And the owner of the company was like, "What do you mean? If they're good for employee number 3, they should be for 1." And I said, "No, that's not the case, because number 1 is the one who has to create the department, and be able to train 2 and 3. I don't have time to train this person right now, so they kind of have to come in with that experience already there." But again, even with those, yes, those skills need to be higher, and we can forgive a little bit of the value loss, but we can't forgive value loss entirely. Values still matter, because when you really think about it, a really high skilled jerk is going to cost you more than a medium skilled team player who's really there to work with your clients and work with your people. So when I look back in my history of folks that have been hired kind of under these circumstances, and I've definitely seen the owner hires a rock star. Oh, this person has so much experience. They've been doing this forever, even in the cell phone world. Oh, they've worked for 3 other cell phone companies in the past. And that actually got me to the point where I would prefer to hire somebody who didn't have cell phone experience over somebody who did at a certain point, because they became overly confident. They became impossible to coach. They came in and they knew exactly what they were doing, when they were doing. They knew their sales pitch. They were fast. They were experienced. And then very, very quickly, employees didn't like working with them. Managers didn't like coaching them, because it was always a pushback, always a fight. They would simply ignore some of the things we said, because it's not the way I used to do it. That's not the way I did it at my last job. And they would talk down to people, especially newer hires or people who weren't in the business as long as them. They would kind of make them feel like crap just because they weren't around as long as them. And the owner or manager would keep them around because they're producing. They're my top seller. Well, in reality, that top seller is actually costing you business, because it's reducing the performance everywhere else, so that they're shining, right? They're the top player because everybody else isn't doing as well, but they're also alienating some of the business. They're alienating management. They're alienating customers potentially because of their attitude. And when they're doing that, if they can't have the trust of their clients, their coworkers, and their supervisors, teams can't scale. That's it. Trust needs to be there. On the flip side of that, I know I already told the story of the person who had all of the values and all of the ability to work with customers and work with people, but I've seen that more than once. I gave that one example of the person in the cell phone stores, but I can honestly say I've seen that in HR departments and operations departments. I can think of one of my employees that worked with me for quite a bit that would actually move from department to department with me. So as I would go as the vice president of strategic development or HR operations, and I would move to a different department, this amazing employee would move with me. And it's not that she knew the next department, right? She didn't go from or project management to operations because she knew operations necessarily. It's that one, gratefully, she wanted to continue working with me, and I loved that, of course, but I knew that she had the ability to learn and desire and want to learn anything that was put in front of her. She was coachable. She was consistent. She was on time. She was curious. She was giving feedback. And not only did she move to operations with me, she then moved to human resources with me. And she actually, to this day, is the leader of the HR department in an over 500 location company, and is one of the most amazing people I've ever known and one of the greatest people I've ever worked with. And again, when she was moving through these different departments, it wasn't because necessarily she had the skill, meaning she wasn't a specialist in operations. She wasn't a specialist in human resources. She became that. She became that because the values existed in who she was. And I'll have to send her this clip. I don't want to say her name because I think she'd get a little embarrassed, but no, I'll have to send her this clip because I really did appreciate not only the time that I worked with her and all the hard work she put into it, but the ability to have somebody to talk about on these calls as somebody who did an amazing job when we look at the skill versus the value. And again, going back to that, her skill now, or her skill very quickly, was leaps and bounds further than most people I could have hired outside that already had the skill but didn't have the value. So got everything in one in this individual once they got into the role. So when we do that, that person not only is going to outperform, they're going to be fun. They're going to help the company scale because of the environment that they create there. So great example of where the values actually outperformed somebody who just came on board with skills. So how do you know these things? Now, I did talk about interviewing already this month, and it's tough. It's tough during an interview. You're not always going to get every bit of information out of somebody immediately. And sometimes people are a little scripted, right? They know exactly what to say during these interviews. But that's why whenever I interview, no matter which side I'm on, whether I'm interviewing to hire somebody or somebody's interviewing me to hire me on as a fractional executive or a consultant, my conversations feel like conversations. They should never feel like a Q&A, because Q&As can be scripted. If it's just reading off a board, they can script that answer back to you. But we should be having these conversations. During these conversations, after we talk about skills, when we get into the value conversations, you're really going to want to ask some specific questions that I can help you with, and really pay attention to their answers and pay attention to the small details in those answers. So for example, give me an example of a time you got tough feedback and what did you do next? Now, of course, everybody's going to answer with, oh, I accepted the tough feedback and I fixed it and all that. But what you're going to really want to listen to are the smaller details on listening for ownership versus excuses. Did they own the problem or did they make excuses for the problem? Now, I'm not saying they're just going to come out and say, oh, it was somebody else's fault. They didn't care. They're in an interview. They know they have to say the right thing. But you're going to hear the little bits in there that talk about, well, even though my coworker really made the mistake, I took accountability. No. Are they owning it? Or are they making excuses? Another is, tell me about a mistake that you made at work. How did you handle it? Listen for honesty. Listen for learning. Listen for how they chose to repair that and how they chose not to make that mistake again. But that ownership and that accountability on themselves is going to be a huge part of that. Here's one too. What does accountability mean to you? Now, I actually had somebody ask me this question really recently. And accountability to me means something different than most others. And accountability to me means I believe in you. Therefore, I'm going to hold you accountable. Therefore, I'm going to hold you to the expectations that I know you could perform at. And we are going to have great conversations to get you to the level you want to be at. A lot of people think accountability means you're in trouble. It means yelling at somebody, getting yelled at, or being yelled at. But listen for clarity versus their vague answers of accountability means working hard. Really listen for the details in their answer. Another would be, if you disagree with your manager, what do you do? That's a tough one. We've all disagreed with our managers before, but how do you handle that? And then another could be, what kind of workplace do you struggle in? I had somebody recently ask me this question and I loved it. I was like, oh, this is such a great question. And my answer back to them was, a workplace where people don't value each other's opinions and feedback. I've worked in places or worked with companies that were very know your place, know your role, stay there. You just do you, rather than providing open feedback, which is never the environment that I like to be in. I like to be somewhere where the teams can always feel like they can come to me with it could be a brand new hire going, hey, I see how you guys do XYZ. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? They're a fresh set of eyes. Why would I ignore that? And I've worked in organizations with like, no, that's not your role. You're a new hire. Pretty much shut up and stay where you're supposed to be. That's the kind of workplace I struggle in, where people's creativity and their thoughts are actually being suppressed and repressed. So there are a ton of other questions that you can ask during the interview. Again, making sure it's conversational, so it's not scripted. They're not just saying the answer they already practiced, but it's something organically coming from who they are and how they feel about their values. And a hard part of this to remember, guys, is charm isn't values. Somebody who can simply talk a good game, they're smiling, they look great, their hair is perfectly done, and they're just presenting well. And I'm not saying that's not important, it is, but charm is not values. They don't equal the same thing. So make sure you're actually strategically listening for those answers. So when we are talking about these things, I want you to think on your history and your career. Have you ever hired somebody with a great resume who's been a cultural disaster? I've been there. It's not fun, and I've definitely learned from that experience. What values are non-negotiable in your business? You can't hire for value match if you don't know what your own values are. Now, I have my own core values that are on the website, and I actually, in speaking to somebody recently, was able to bring them up and have great dialogue about them because I truly believe in them. What are your core values? And if you don't have them published, you don't have them posted, you should. You should know them, your team should know them, and then you're able to hire to those. If you happen to have a recruiter, I know a lot of our small businesses, us as owner-operators, are doing our own recruiting, but if you have a recruiter, they should know those too, because they have to make sure we're focusing on those and they match. And again, if you guys want any of my interview questions, want me to help with interview, want me to do interviews with you or for you, I'm certainly here to do that. Check out LFG on our website, LeMayFusionGroup.com. Check out our socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram we're on, or just give me a text or call, 732-508-0580. Always here to support and help. Next week, we're going to be talking about onboarding as a growth strategy. Hiring isn't just the win. Getting that person in the seat isn't the win. It's making sure that they can perform. That's what you brought somebody in for, to perform. So getting that onboarding done quickly, done efficiently, done well, super important. That's what we're going to talk about it a little bit next week. But until then, team, finish your drink, take a deep breath, and go lead with intention today. Thanks so much, everyone.